Hello, everybody. Mr. H here with you. Welcome to the Second World War, Chapter 24 in your book. Hey, write this down real quick, what you see before you. This is the countdown to the Second World War. Everything that happened before it finally blew up. Took 20 years, but they finally got there. Got it? Good. Moving on. All right, here's Europe in 1939. Hitler had come to power, made an ally out of Italy, fascist Italy, and you've got these strong men showing up. Now, how did Hitler come to power? Well, Germany was down and hurt, right, especially with the Treaty of Versailles. They'd limited the army to 100,000, no navy, no air force, and stuck them with the blame for the First World War at a reparations bill that wouldn't have been paid off until 1989 or 2010, according to another source. But basically, they've crippled Germany. It was looking okay in the 20s for a while, then the Depression hit, and it was pretty bad in Germany. Now, the way Hitler came to power is very simple, and we've seen it before. It's when you're down and you're hurt, and some guy shows up, says he's going to make it all better, yeah, people tend to follow a guy like this. Remember Roman Republic, Julius Caesar? Same sort of things happening in Germany, except, better weapons. Now, the first thing he was talking about is pan-German nationalism. He wants to unite all of Germany under one banner. And of course, he needs a scapegoat, and it goes after the Jewish people because they're a minority and they're somewhat different. Never mind, got along fine with Jewish people, since the 1500s. Now they're suddenly the enemy. But Germany is going to, reunite all the German people under one banner. He's going to make Germany a great power once more, and maybe even greater than that. Remember the template that Roosevelt was using, get out depression over here in the States? What was that first step? Right, relief, recovery, reform. Relief, building up the army, get the factories going. All Germans suddenly have jobs again. Recovery, all right, now they actually have money. They can spend it on stuff. They're building autobahns. So now we're making things better. And of course, reform, Hitler's got his own idea of reform, and it's not exactly confined to Germany. In 1938, he marches into Austria, takes over Austria. Austria's happy. People in Austria, they're Germans too. They want to be united in one country. Now we got the Sudetenland here. Later on in October of 1938, this part of Czechoslovakia with a lot of Germans living in it. He takes that over, telling the French and the British, take that, and that's all I want. Of course, he's lying. He's Hitler. I don't know why everybody was so surprised. In March of 1939, takes over the rest of Czechoslovakia. So here comes Poland. Lots of Germans living in Poznan and what they call the Polish Corridor. Want to unite these two parts of Germany. Now here's Germany's strategic dilemma. It looks like 1914 all over again. Two fronts, the French and British on one side, and the other side we've got the Russians, or Soviet Union they're calling themselves in 1939. Germany's allies, Italy, they got Japan on the other side, calling themselves the Axis powers. So what's Germany going to do? I got to find some way to avoid getting caught on two fronts, as Hitler's saying to himself. So he makes a deal with the Soviet Union, the Pact of Steel, a German-Soviet agreement, non-aggression treaty. They're not going to fight each other. They're going to split Poland, and they're not going to fight each other. Of course, this is Joseph Stalin over here and Adolf Hitler, so they're going to backstab each other at some point. Depends who goes after who first. But for right now, boom! September the 1st, 1939, they split Poland in half. The Germans attack. World War II has started. France and Britain declare war on Germany. The Russians grab the other side. Hey, Germany and Russia aren't going to fight each other, so Germany can turn and attack these guys with everything they got. Here's two things I want you to know about: tactical and strategic. Tactical, the official definition is utilizing specific resources to achieve a sub-goal. All right, in other words, it's what's in front of you. I got a machine gun net in front of me, enemy occupied house, some kind of position. They call this below the shoulders work because you have to pick up a weapon and go after somebody with this. And then we have strategic, broader goals that advance overall objectives of an organization. In other words, it's the big picture. Conquest of France, big picture. It's what they call above the shoulders because, you're in the general staff, you got to think about this stuff and order people to carry things. Enough tactical stuff, and you get strategic, like Legos. A whole bunch of Legos, put them together, you got something bigger. So they got the strategic part of this thing worked out, right? Keep the Russians at bay on one side with a treaty, go after the French and British, everything you got. But tactical's going to be an issue because everybody still remembers the First World War and what happened there. First World War, you ran straight at people, and that was usually the end of it. You ran at them, got machine gunned, and you came back, and nobody else did. And you keep doing this for 3 or 4 years, and you don't have an army left, and the line hasn't moved. Trying to avoid this kind of thing. And Germany's thinking, we got to avoid this. I don't want to go through this again. Of course, the French and British don't want to go through it either, but Germany's the one on the attack. Let me show you a quick couple terms here. Direct frontal assault. Everybody comes straight at the position, right? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I hit the wall, I hit the fortifications, you can't get over. A lot of people get killed. Maybe you get lucky and smash through it the first time, but a lot of times it doesn't work that way. So what you usually do is have a direct frontal assault that pulls everybody's attention forward, and you got other people that come around the side. They climb over the wall, get behind, and hit the guy from behind, you crush the whole position. Sometimes you have an encirclement. You just circle them and you keep going and wait for them to starve to death or give up. But you circle them and you bypass them and you hit some other guy somewhere down the road. This is tactical, stuff in front of you. Do this enough time, you have a big strategic picture. Now here's how the Germans are going to get past all this. Now in the First World War, remember, direct assault, frontal assault, up the middle. A lot of people get killed, you end up coming back, try to find more people to go do it again. Germany says we're going to do this a little bit different this time. Whereas a French or British position ahead of us, instead of running straight at it, we're going to bomb it from the air. This is called a blitzkrieg. Blitz, lightning, Krieg, war, lightning, war. So we got the idea of the blitz in football, by the way. So the bomber, Stuka dive bomber right here, is going to come crashing down and drop bombs on top of the position and try to kill everybody in there. It won't get everybody, but they got quite a few. So the infantry guys are getting ready to run now after they see the bombers hit. Nope, not going to go yet because here comes the second part of it. The tanks. So the Stukas have bombed everything. Here come the tanks. You're firing your machine gun. You could fire all day long at this thing. It's not going to matter because it's made of metal. It just bounces off and they're going to plow right through you. As you can see, the tank has gotten a lot better in the 20 years since the last World War. The Germans have had time to think about this and they've put that time to good use, as you can see. So the French or British position gets bombed by the Stukas. The tanks run through and plow through everybody and squash anybody still there. And round three, the infantry finally shows up. They clean up what's left, bringing their weapons along with them, or if everything's worked out the way it's supposed to be, they just bring a mop and some paper towels. In 1914, these guys would have run at that machine gun net and half of them would have been dead. In 1939, the Stukas hit first, the tanks plow through everybody, and then they show up. And these guys are moving on to the next goal. Might lose a guy here and there, but it's a lot better than losing the whole platoon. The blitzkrieg stops for nothing. Only kittens. People like kittens. Even Nazis like kittens. Ever notice that a lot of U.S. Army equipment has a German sort of look to it? It's not because anyone's in sympathy with the Nazis. The reason it looks like German equipment is because German equipment tends to be pretty good and that stuff worked really well. Say what you will about the Nazis, they did know what they were doing. German tank, US M1, I think this is a Mach 3. See how boxy it is? It's hard. The shells hit and they bounce. It got the sloping on it. Same here, so they moved the slope up here. So it has sort of a German look. Even our infantry weapons are based on old German designs. The M16, now M4. Even the helmets have sort of a German look to it. Defend the back of your neck a little bit. So, if it works, it works. Just because you don't like where it came from doesn't mean it doesn't work. Now, all Germans Nazis. Not everyone's enamored with Hitler. The one thing everybody agrees, though, is that they want to make Germany a great power again. They want to reverse what they see as an unjust Treaty of Versailles. They want to unite all of Germany in one country. So as long as Hitler's winning, People will put up with him. And of course, some people are actually fanatics who love him. Here's some terms I think you should know. Here's the Wehrmacht. This is the regular German army, right? These guys, regular German army, they're going to follow, I'm not going to say the Geneva Convention, that's not till 1949. They have the 1899 Hague Convention. So they're going to follow the rules of war. The Wehrmacht, they have their moments every now and then going to shoot people, but for the most part, you're going to be okay if you're captured by the Wehrmacht. Might get slapped around a little. Here's the German Air Force, Luftwaffe, right? Waffe, air, Luft, armed air. German Air Force. And the Kriegsmarine. Marine, Sea, Krieg, War, Sea. German Navy. These guys, regular German military, yeah, they're trying to make Germany a huge power again, but they're not psychotic most of the time. Waffen SS, bad news. Schutzstaffen, stormtrooper. Waffen, armed stormtroopers. These guys are really bad news. And there they are, even look bad. This is where they got the name Stormtrooper for Star Wars. Different animal. These guys can't shoot. These guys, they can. And they've thrown the entire Hague rulebook out the window, probably stuck it on a bayonet. Very bad news. Black uniforms, very angry looking. See, can't really see the lightning bolts on there, but you know, it exists, and just stay away from these guys. Of course, might not have a choice with the Blitzkrieg and everything, right? Now, the Germans, the Blitzkrieg is frighteningly effective. And it is a terrifying thing to have lived through. I'm fortunate I never had to deal with this, and hopefully never will, and I hope no one ever does. But in 1939, 1940, it was really bad. In 1939, the Germans crushed Poland, the Russians come from the other end, and now they can turn loose on France and Britain. There's a really bad winter in 1939, so the Germans and the Allies are staring at each other over the Maginot Lines, a defensive line in France, and they're calling it Sitzkrieg, right, making fun of Blitzkrieg. But yeah, the joke ended in April of 1940 when the Germans grabbed Denmark and Norway, and then they turned loose directly on France and Britain. They come tearing their way through the Low Countries, that's Belgium and Netherlands and Luxembourg. German Army Group A goes through there. Army Group B is attacking the Maginot Line. Remember the diagram? You pin the guys in front and swoop around the side. And then here comes Army Group C, right on that hinge between A and B, and they smash their way through, defeat the British and French, drive the British completely off the continent, and they turn loose and crush the French. And the German Air Force, Luftwaffe, is shooting up the French every step of the way. This is an ME, Messerschmitt ME 109. Very effective battle plane, warplane. It was based on an animal. What kind of animal do you think it's based on? I'll give you a hint. It's not a bird. Take a good look at that. There's a Stuka, by the way. Now, this looks like a shark. It was based on a shark, and this thing moved through the air pretty fast, so it's hard to shoot it down. This is a British Spitfire. Not quite as good as the Messerschmitt, but hey, they're fighting over Great Britain. So if you get shot down, hey, you're in Great Britain, you find a base, you run back. This guy gets shot down, he's a prisoner, out of the war. So after France had fallen, they try to bomb the British into submission. And like I said, it's not going to work because the British are flying over their own island. So the German Air Force can't really force the British into surrender. But man, did they cause a lot of damage. Look what they're working on, man. German technology is frightening. They were already working on jet fighters at this point. Now this thing is an Me-262 Messerschmitt, called the Swallow. This thing got into the air for the first time in 1944. Then you start seeing it in combat in 1945. At that point, Germany was going to lose the war. But just imagine if this thing had showed up earlier. I think German technology is frightening. It was probably better than ours at the time. What's America doing? Well, we're trying to stay out of this thing. Got mixed up in the First World War. Don't want to go through that again. U.S. has pulled back to North America. Let the Europeans smack each other around. We got this thing called the good neighbor policy towards Latin America. For the longest time, we kind of been sticking our nose into Latin American affairs and setting up strongmen who were pro-U.S. And we decided to stop doing that most of the time. The view on the First World War in the 20 years since the war had become negative. you went in 1917, 1918 over to do a great thing, and then it's been 20 years and you start looking back at it, and you're like, why did we get mixed up in this thing again? Well, there's the merchants of death conspiracy theory. People were saying the First World War was a result of merchants of death on both sides starting a war so they make a lot of money. Other people were now convinced that we've been tricked into the war somehow to fight on behalf of the French and British to save them, and we didn't get anything out of it, according to them. So in 1937, they ran a poll, was the First World War worth it? And most Americans saw it as a mistake. So they really don't want to get mixed up again in another world war. Of course, it might not be up to us, right? Neutrality Act was passed in 1937. No arms sales to belligerent countries. No Americans go on a ship of a country that's at war. Can't stop them, but if you go on that ship and something happens to you, you're on your own. That's what the law's saying. So as you can see, we're trying to stay out of this war. FDR realizes, again, it might not be up to us. Spoiler alert, Pearl Harbor. He's already got a military buildup starting in 1938. He's having trouble finding money because, that Great Depression thing, but hey, they scrape up $300 million. Only thing more expensive than getting ready for a war is losing a war. In 1939, a $1.3 billion defense budget, all-time record. 1939, yeah, we've broken that. Now he realizes he's not going to get the American people to fight in this thing unless we get attacked directly. Spoiler alert, Pearl Harbor. So he decides to go with what he's called a cash and carry. We have people pay for the weapons and carry it off, right? How do you get around Neutrality Act? You build the weapons, you put them on the Canadian border, the British take it, and off they go with it. They pay us and walk off. Pay us, we make the stuff. Hey, people working in the factory, remember relief, recovery, reform? Maybe we become the arsenal of democracy. You make the weapons for the French and British, and they'll do the fighting. Also, lend lease. They got like old destroyers, old ships. Hey, we'll give them to the British, and we get to rent out the Bahamas base or Bermuda, or maybe some other favor somewhere down the road. So they're trying to find a way around the Neutrality Act to help the French and British, and getting ready for a war in case it comes to us. You don't know what's going to happen, so you're trying to cover everything. Who is the bigger threat, Japan or Germany? Japan's over there in the Pacific, and they're tough fighters, and they had the world's greatest airplane, Japanese Zero. Of course, nobody knew that until Pearl Harbor. And you've already seen what the Germans can do. So, who's the bigger threat? Our allies of France and Britain. They're the ones getting smacked around right now. Japan's quiet at the moment, but that's not going to last. So here we are, the Second World War European theater. We're not going to go through every battle, so I'm going to go through it a little bit quick here for you. Now, we know what happened here with the Blitzkrieg. Army Group A comes to the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg. Army Group B attacks the Maginot Line. So they're pinned here, and here come the guy with the envelopment coming around the side. And then right when they get ready to fight this, Army Group C comes to that hinge, and boom, down goes France. The British are back on their island. The Germans try to bomb them into submission with the Battle of Britain. Not going to happen. And now Germany's got a problem. I got this armed enemy still alive, Britain, and they're going to fight the Russians eventually. But nice if Britain was out of this thing, either conquer the British or let them off the hook easy. Germany's ally Italy hops in down here, tries to attack the Suez Canal. They're not going to get there. They also attack Greece, and that doesn't go very well. They didn't think it through, and the Greeks were waiting for them. And Greece wins big time and embarrasses Italy. So now Germany has to do something about this. Hungary joins Germany, Romania, Bulgaria happy to join them. They have to smash their way through Yugoslavia, and they help the Italians finally take Greece. Grandparents got executed there. I don't like talking too much about that. So now it's going to come down to Germany versus the Soviet Union. We knew this was going to happen at some point, and it finally does in 1941. June the 22nd, 1941, 0400, Germany attacks the Soviet Union. I remember this date because A, I'm Mr. H, and B, it's my wife's birthday, June 22nd. As you can see, they get really close to Moscow. They came close. Finland joins in because they got some beef here with the Russians. All these allies, they're smashing their way in. He thought he could take the Russians down quickly and just can't quite get there, man. Too far away, and then boom, winter hits. And you know what winter's like in Russia? Can't take Moscow. Came close. Operation Typhoon on November the 28th, 1941. Everything they got, December the 6th, can't quite reach Moscow. They can see it through the binoculars, and they can't quite get there. And then what happens December 7th? All right, Pearl Harbor, U.S., Japan go after each other, and Germany and Italy, Germany's the senior partner, Italy just follows along, for some reason declares war on the United States. I have no idea why. So now you're caught on two fronts and a much, much bigger enemy on the other side of the Atlantic with industrial capacity greater you, Germany, and the Soviet Union combined is coming to fight you. And you're the one who declared war on them. I don't get it either. Fortunately, he was dumb enough to do it, and the Nazis will lose. Alrighty, so what's going on now? Well, they get stuck over here in Russia, and now they got a second front. U.S. and British, they land here in North Africa. France was still in charge with the Nazis there. Germans sent people down here. They're eventually going to crush them and send them into Italy, invade Italy. And then eventually we get D-Day, Saving Private Ryan. The Americans and British and Canadians get on the beach over here, liberate France. The Russians have been pushing back in some extremely brutal battles over here, things that are just unreal, the casualty figures and people getting executed left and right, forget rules of war out here. And eventually they're going to push the Germans back, and the Allies are going to push them back over this direction. Italy's going to switch sides. Mussolini gets hung upside down on a meat hook. Hitler shoots himself in his bunker in Germany, and the Soviet Union from one side, France, Britain, and the United States from the other side completely crushed the Nazis between the two of them. There it is. So, end of the Second World War, you can see where the battle lines are. Here's what the Russians got. We got this far, and they've met up. Now, you have to remember something. Yeah, might as well go to that while we're at it. The Soviet Union didn't get along too well with the West, the whole capitalist versus communist thing. But they both had one enemy, the Nazis, when they started shooting at each other. Now that the Nazis are gone, suddenly they're looking at each other. And they might not get along too well, but weirdly enough, Mr. Aristocrat FDR gets along pretty well with Stalin. But this is a tough war, and take a look at FDR, man. This thing is killing him. The Tehran Conference in 1943, they met and discussed strategy to fight the war. And then they met again in 1945 at Yalta. 2 years later, and look at this. Churchill always looks like Churchill. No big surprise there. Stalin looks like Stalin. Okay, no big surprise there. Look at FDR. Looks, pretty strong, pretty healthy. How about now? Oh, God, this is not looking good, man. Because not only is this war literally killing him, he's got to worry about what happens after the war. He doesn't want the West and the Soviet Union to go after each other in World War III at the end of World War II. And at the Yalta Conference, with Germany about to be defeated, what are we going to do with Europe now that the war's over? Well, the Soviet Union's occupying one half, and the Western Allies have the other half, and they get a promise from Stalin that the new governments in Eastern Europe are going to have free, fair, and open elections. And Stalin says, sure, no problem, free, fair, and open. Your choices are the Communist Workers' Party or the Communist Workers' Party. And that's what we call the Iron Curtain, and the Cold War is getting ready to get started. East Germany, that's communist. West Germany, that's democratic. Eventually, we're going to have a security organization alliance called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the Soviet Union builds the Warsaw Pact. What Russia is afraid of, and they have a history of being invaded, is that they don't want another invasion coming from the West. That's why they've pushed their border all the way over here. So if any invader from the West comes, look how far they got to go before they even get to the Soviet Union. And of course, we're paranoid about the Soviet Union because look what they've done. They've come all this way, and they'll keep going until somebody stops them. So the former allies, U.S., Britain, and the Soviet Union are now adversaries. And we're just hoping there isn't a there's end of the Second World War, hoping doesn't lead to a First World War. Because later on we'll have nuclear weapons, and if they ever go nuclear, this conversation never going to happen. That's what's going on over in Europe. We're going to talk about the Pacific next. Guys, have a great day. I'll talk to you later.